It was a typical day, with dark clouds rolling in as I wrapped up work. The rain began slowly, but before long, it was pouring down, flooding the streets. As I trudged through the water-soaked path toward my apartment, I noticed something that made me stop in my tracks, a tiny kitten, shivering and huddled by the edge of a gutter. His little body was drenched, and he looked terrified, displaced by the floodwaters. Instantly, my heart broke for the poor creature. I couldn't leave him there. Without a second thought, I rushed over, scooped him up in my arms, and cradled him against my chest. He was cold, frail, and barely moving. Back at my place, I dried him off with a towel, careful not to hurt him. I had no idea how long he had been out in the rain, but he wasn't getting any better. In fact, his breathing was shallow, and I feared the worst. Panic set in. This tiny life was slipping away, and I had no idea how to save him. Without hesitation, I rushed him to the vet, hoping for a miracle. The waiting room of the vet clinic was cold, and I sat there clutching the kitten in my arms, feeling helpless. I had already given up hope that he would survive. He seemed so weak, barely able to hold on. The vet took him into the examination room, and I sat there, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. What if he didn't make it? What if I had found him too late? Minutes felt like hours as I waited, the sound of rain still pounding against the clinic windows. Finally, the vet came back, and I braced myself for bad news. But instead, there was a glimmer of hope. The kitten, despite his condition, had a fighting chance. He needed care, but he could survive. Relief washed over me, and I thanked the vet profusely. I took the little guy home and decided to name him Simba, after the brave lion cub in my favorite movie. Little did I know, Simba would become so much more than just a pet. He would become a part of my life, a constant companion in my otherwise lonely existence. When Simba came home, I set up a small, cozy bed for him near my heater to help him recover from the cold. He was still fragile, but each day, he grew a little stronger. Watching him heal gave me a deep sense of satisfaction and purpose. It wasn't long before Simba became more than just the kitten I had rescued. He became my best friend. He was incredibly affectionate, always following me around the apartment. Simba had this remarkable way of sensing my moods. On days when I came home tired and stressed, he would nuzzle against me, his soft purring calming my nerves. And when I was happy, he was even happier, bouncing around the room as if to celebrate with me. We formed a bond that words couldn't quite describe, a companionship that made the world outside my shabby apartment feel distant. Simba quickly adapted to my daily routine. Every morning, he would sit by the door, watching with sad eyes as I prepared for work. It was as though he knew that I was leaving, and he didn't like it one bit. His little frown always made me feel guilty for stepping out, but I had no choice. I had to work. The moment I returned home, though, Simba would be waiting by the door, his tail flicking with excitement. He would weave between my legs, meowing loudly, demanding all my attention. His joy was infectious, and no matter how tough the day had been, seeing Simba's happiness always lifted my spirits. I tried to give him the best life I could, though I sometimes felt like he deserved more than I could provide. But despite my insecurities, Simba never seemed to mind. He accepted me, flaws and all. 2 years passed in the blink of an eye. During that time, Simba became my closest companion. We shared countless moments, from lazy weekends curled up together on the couch to long nights where I would talk to him about my worries as he purred beside me. His intelligence amazed me. He could sense when I was upset, offering comfort in his quiet, gentle way. But as time went on, I started to notice subtle changes in Simba. He was no longer the vibrant, energetic kitten he once was. His playfulness diminished, and though he was still affectionate, there was a heaviness about him. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something was wrong. I chalked it up to age, hoping it was just a phase. Little did I know, the worst was yet to come. One morning, I woke up to find Simba unusually still, lying on his side instead of greeting me with his usual morning meows. When he finally did come over to me, I noticed something strange. There was a tear running from his right eye. At first, I thought it was nothing serious, maybe just a minor irritation. But the tear persisted, and over the next few days, it became more pronounced. Worried, I decided to take Simba to the local vet. The visit felt routine. The vet prescribed some medication, assuring me that it would clear up in no time. I trusted their expertise and followed their advice. However, as the days passed, Simba's condition didn't improve. In fact, it got worse. The tear became more frequent, and soon his eye looked inflamed. I started to feel an uneasy pit in my stomach. Something was terribly wrong. As Simba's condition worsened, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. His once lively eyes were now dim, and he wasn't as energetic as before. Even though the local vet had given him medication, I began to suspect that we were dealing with something more than a minor infection. It felt like every day, I was losing more of the Simba I knew. He no longer purred as loudly, and even his playful moments were scarce. I tried to convince myself that he would get better, but deep down, the guilt gnawed at me. I had trusted the vet, but what if I should have done more? What if I should have taken him to a bigger clinic? These thoughts haunted me, but at the time, I was bound by my financial limitations. I wanted the best for Simba, but I had to face the harsh reality. I simply couldn't afford it. That decision, one born of necessity, would soon become my greatest regret. Eventually, Simba's eye became swollen and painful to the touch. I could no longer stand by and watch him suffer, so I made the decision to take him to a bigger veterinary clinic. The guilt of not going sooner weighed heavily on me, but I knew it was time to act. To the new clinic, the vet examined Simba carefully, her expression growing more serious with each passing minute. After running some tests, she gave me the diagnosis, uveitis, a painful inflammation in his eye. My heart sank as she explained that the condition had advanced significantly because we hadn't sought treatment early enough. Tears welled up in my eyes. If only I had borrowed money or found a way to get Simba proper care sooner. The vet went on to explain that surgery was the only option to save his eye, and the cost would be a staggering $5,000. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Where would I find that kind of money? After the vet visit, I couldn't stop blaming myself. Simba's condition had worsened under my watch, and now, surgery was the only option to prevent permanent damage. But $5,000 was more than I could ever afford. The guilt consumed me, tearing at my conscience. Why hadn't I done more? Why didn't I take him to a better vet sooner? I should have been more proactive, more vigilant. Every time I looked at Simba's painful eye, I felt like I had failed him. Simba, despite his discomfort, still followed me around, offering quiet companionship as always. His resilience only made the guilt harder to bear. I was his guardian, his protector, and yet, I couldn't even ensure his basic well-being. The helplessness I felt was overwhelming, but I knew I couldn't give up on him. He had fought to survive once before, and I would do everything in my power to help him fight again, even if that meant asking for help in a way I never had before. With no other options, I decided to turn to social media to raise the money for Simba's surgery. It was a vulnerable step, opening up about my financial struggles and Simba's condition to strangers. I hoped that people would see the love I had for him and understand how much he meant to me. I carefully crafted my post, sharing Simba's story from the day I found him shivering in the rain to the painful diagnosis we now faced. I attached photos of Simba, his once bright, playful eyes now clouded with pain. At first, the response was encouraging. A few kind-hearted individuals offered to donate, and we started raising some money. But then, the comments started turning dark. Instead of empathy, people began mocking Simba's appearance. They called him ugly, blind, and worse. It broke my heart to see my beloved pet, the one who had brought me so much joy, become the target of such cruelty. Despite the hate, some people stood by us, donating whatever they could. Still, the barrage of bullying and hurtful comments was relentless, and I found myself retreating from the online world. The bullying didn't stop. Every time I logged into social media, there were new comments mocking Simba's appearance. Strangers, who knew nothing of his story or the bond we shared, tore him down with cruel words. They called him ugly and blind, as if his pain was something to laugh at. It was unbearable. Each time I saw another hateful comment, it felt like a knife to the heart. I couldn't stand it anymore, so I deactivated my account, retreating from the online world that had become so hostile. For weeks, I stayed offline, focusing all my attention on Simba. He was still suffering, but he hadn't given up. Even with his painful eye, he would curl up beside me, purring softly as if to comfort me, even though I should have been the one comforting him. Despite everything, Simba's spirit hadn't been broken, and that gave me the strength to keep going. I knew that deactivating my account wouldn't solve anything. I had to get back online if I wanted to raise the money for his surgery. With a deep breath, I reactivated my account. The bullying resumed immediately, but this time, I was ready. I ignored the cruel comments and focused on the few people who were still supporting us. Donations started coming in again, and we were slowly closing in on our goal. Through it all, I kept posting updates about Simba's condition, sharing his story with anyone who would listen. I couldn't believe it, after all the heartache and setbacks, we had finally made it. Simba was going to get the surgery he so desperately needed. The day of the surgery was filled with nerves and anxiety. I stayed by Simba's side until the vet took him into the operating room, whispering promises that everything would be okay. It was out of my hands now, all I could do was wait. Hours passed, each one feeling longer than the last, but finally, the vet came out with good news: the surgery had been a success. Simba had pulled through. The relief was overwhelming. Simba would need time to recover, but he was on the road to healing. I couldn't wait to bring him home and give him the peaceful life he deserved. When I finally saw him after the surgery, he was groggy but alive, his little body fighting through it all. I knew we still had a long way to go, but for the first time in months, I felt real hope. Simba's recovery was slow but steady. Every day, I saw improvements. His energy began to return, and his eye, though still healing, was no longer causing him pain. It was a long road, but Simba was resilient. His spirit hadn't wavered, and neither had my love for him. As the weeks went by, he regained his strength, becoming the playful, affectionate cat I had always known. Through it all, the support from kind strangers continued. People who had followed our journey sent messages of encouragement, celebrating each small victory with us. Simba's story had touched so many lives, and I was endlessly grateful for the kindness that had saved him. Now, Simba is fully recovered, and life has returned to normal. Simba, with his battle scars, is stronger than ever. Every time I look at him, I'm reminded of everything we went through, the heartbreak, the cruelty, the kindness, and the hope. In the end, Simba's surgery wasn't just about saving his eye. It was about saving both of us. He gave me purpose, companionship, and a reason to keep going, even when things seemed impossible. And together, we fought through the darkest moments and emerged stronger. Simba's story will always remind me that love and kindness can overcome even the cruelest of obstacles. He's not just my pet, he's my family, and together, we've created a life full of love, resilience, and hope.